When Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity was announced, it was probably one of the games I was excited for the most across the entire year. Breath of the Wild means so much to me. It's literally one of my favorite games of all time. I think it's Nintendo's most ambitious game, or at least it has been in a very, very long time. And it's just a game that I respect so much. And so to hear that we're getting a game that's a prequel to that 100 years ago was the coolest thing I'd ever heard, and it made such sense for a Dynasty Warriors type game. But I did have my doubts. My doubt number one was that the game would be too short. Luckily, that doesn't seem to be the case, so thank God for that. But my second doubt, and the one that has actually came to fruition, was the fact that the game would change events, alter story beats, and create this new thing that doesn't represent the actual events as portrayed in Breath of the Wild. And yup, that's exactly what happened. From the very beginning of the game, you get this time-traveling baby guardian that goes back in time to tell Zelda and Co. all about what's gonna happen. Now, this event alone wasn't enough for me to come up with a solid conclusion. It could technically tie into the events of Breath of the Wild. The Guardian warning Zelda of the Calamity could have been their reason to be fighting to fend it off. It could have given them a purpose and it would have made sense to the story. They know the Calamity is coming, let's try and stop it, thanks to this Guardian telling us that it's coming. That makes sense to me. That could have worked on its own, but obviously, as I'm here today, they changed much more than that. But number one, the first thing I want to talk about is how much they shoved this baby guardian into the story. It is in almost every major cutscene in the game, and it feels like the whole story revolves around it. That's not very interesting. With Breath of the Wild, I wanted to see the lore of that game opened up more, not this random new gimmicky element. It's not at all very interesting. Yeah, the design is cute, blah de blah de blah, but other than that, just so uninteresting. Time travel plots are, to me, so generic, overdone, and boring. And I know you guys are going to bring up Ocarina of Time as a defense, but that was its own self-contained story, whereas Breath of the Wild, of course, is like this universe now. We've got Breath of the Wild 2, Age of Calamity. It's its own world that they're trying to build up. It's changing events of the original game through time travel, which is much different than having a game that was always focused around the time travel element, being Ocarina of Time. But what this does, I haven't even discussed the events of the story yet, but what this does straight away is make the game hella misleading for people to buy. The game was marketed as being set 100 years ago, before the events of the Calamity that took place in Breath of the Wild. Well, that is just simply not the case anymore. It is now a Calamity taking place in a version of Breath of the Wild, not the event. So it already takes away that sort of impact right there. And I'm not happy about this. This is the biggest worry I had. Final Fantasy VII Remake pretty much did the exact same thing. Called itself a remake, promised itself as a remake, but in the end, by the end of the story, you realize that it's something completely different and has nothing to do with the original game. It changes events so much that future titles in the Final Fantasy VII Remake series cannot possibly follow the events of the original game. It's just impossible, unless they retcon what happened in FF7R, but that's just not going to happen. And this game has now done pretty much the same thing. It's not the same events anymore. They've changed stuff, messed with story beats, and by the end they actually stopped the Calamity, which obviously didn't happen because that's the reason Breath of the Wild existed. And the issue isn't only that the story is changed, which is a big issue because the game was marketed as being a proper prequel to Breath of the Wild, which it now isn't. It's the fact that the new story is just kinda crap. So it undermines a lot of the character motives. Zelda struggling with her powers was a big thing in Breath of the Wild, and in this game she learns them and she stops the Calamity. So that struggle of her trying to release her inner powers are now just gone entirely. The things she withheld in Breath of the Wild and fully realized in Breath of the Wild, now gone. She did it in Age of Calamity. Boom, shakalaka. Then there's this stupid future characters thing. They bring back future characters from Breath of the Wild into this game, which is so dumb. But Sidon, a fan favorite character, which by the way is the reason for all of this, I'll get into that in a bit. Sidon is put back in this game and he gets to see his sister Mipha. And that just ruins his entire character growth of being so sad about Mipha, fighting for Mipha. He just comes back and saves her. Boring. That is so dull. What a boring, undermining plot element. And yet again, fan service. The thing with this story is that it has obviously prioritized fan service over actual narrative. They've changed the game so that there has to be a definitive ending where everybody's happy, and it's just so dull. I thought the uniqueness of this was that it wasn't all going to be sunshine and rainbows. Yeah, bad things can happen. This game doesn't end well, but don't worry, because Calamity Ganon, no more, thanks to Breath of the Wild. This game is all about the tragic events. Tragedy. That's what this game was meant to be all about. It's portrayed in all of the marketing material. And yet here we are, they end the game and they defeat the Calamity. What the actual fuck? That is so dumb. And the plot again just feels so generic. Bringing back characters from the future is just such an overdone idea, and it is not at all interesting. This game has no unique spin on it. It's just simply, oh yeah, they're now here to save the champions. Like, if they had said from the beginning of the game, by the way, these do not represent the actual events that happen in Breath of the Wild, and if they marketed the game as not as a proper prequel, but a what-if scenario, then I wouldn't have gone in expecting an actual prequel and more lore to the story of Breath of the Wild. This isn't canon, and that's such a big issue. This game is not canon to the series, and if you're gonna say it's canon, then it's just a split timeline, and how much do we love those, guys? I can't wait for them to sell us another book with this split in the timeline. So we're never, by the way, we're never gonna get a true representation of what happens 100 years ago. That's never gonna happen. Yeah, you can get a rough idea from this game, but we'll never get to witness the moments where the champions die and where Ganon properly takes over. We will never get to see that or witness it. Now we have to literally just judge that off of Breath of the Wild and use our imagination. Great, so this game's purpose was entirely defeated. And I think the thing that left me dumbfounded by the end of this was the fact that none of this time-traveling nonsense is explained by the end of the story. The game literally just ends with the future champions leaving, and that's it. The end. That's it. Done. Like, no explanation of, this isn't meant to happen. What happened after this? Blah, blah, blah. Nothing. It just, goodbye, Sidon. The end. Like, oh, what? That left me just dumbfounded. And yet, there's an alternate ending, by the way, where you unlock the Guardian. It's called Terraco, I think, the baby Guardian. And also, that is stupidly dumb. Zelda forgot that she built the baby Guardian, and that it was taken away from her by her father. How in the hell do you forget such a tragic event like that? How do you forget that you invented a time-traveling Zelda lullaby singing Baby Guardian? How does anyone forget that? She's only 17, so it's not even like it happened that long ago. How does that make any sense? Why was that not explained? How the hell did she get her memories, like, pretty much wiped like that? Because that's exactly what it felt like. Because I don't think anyone would forget building something like that. A time-traveling Baby Guardian? What in the actual hell? The new character is so boring. Astor, he is just so dull. I think, by the way, he's meant to be an embodiment of Ganon, because he, by the way, barely explained either. He's literally just an evil bad guy to be an evil bad guy. Boo ha ha, stop fate, ha ha ha. It's literally Final Fantasy VII Remake all over again. And then he's killed, and then that's it. Like, he forms into, like, Calamity Ganon, and then that's really it. There's a baby Guardians that looks like Terraco with him as well, and I don't know if that was ever explained. I have no idea what that is. Genuinely no clue. The game doesn't explain it, so I'm lost. Maybe I missed it. So, overall, Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity was a massive marketing ploy. You did not get to witness the events of what happened 100 years before Breath of the Wild. You get to witness a event that happened in a Calamity during a version of Breath of the Wild, not the definitive thing that happened. So you'll never know what happens, because they're never going to make another game like this ever again. This was their one chance to do it, and it's now gone. Unless they release DLC that actually changes the story and, like, actually shows what happens, then fair enough. I don't believe they'll ever do that. The new characters could have easily been in there some sort of, like, bubble where they're just playable. The game tells you, da-da-da-da-da, this isn't canon, not part of the story. These are just DLC characters you can play as in some of the story missions. Done. They didn't need to shove them into the narrative, and they did because they're fan favorites. I don't know. I just don't know. It just makes me really sad. Anyways, that's my, I guess, rant off the cuff. No script, no nothing. I was just not happy. This game was one of my most anticipated games of the year, thanks to its promise. and it failed to deliver. And the sad part is, the game is fun, the music is fantastic, but the marketing ploy of this game was that it was a prequel to the highest selling Zelda game ever made, Breath of the Wild. So they knew how excited fans would be, and so they must have consciously known that changing the events of the story is going to anger some people. And we know this because the game has sold over 3 million copies already, and by the time I'm making this video, it's not even been a week. Not a week, and it's already sold 3 million. So people were excited, obviously. It's Breath of the Wild. It's more Breath of the Wild. I'm waiting for people to realize that the game isn't actually a prequel and is some alternate universe game. And then we'll see if the game really holds up in a few years' time, because I don't think it will. I don't think it will at all. The game's fun, but without that story, the most promising aspect of the whole game, you're just left with a hack and slash game. A good one at that. It's cool that it incorporates events of Breath of the Wild. It's fun, but it's nothing more than that. There's no deeper meanings. Whereas Breath of the Wild has so many underlying layers that make up that game. I'm not happy, but if you guys disagree, which I absolutely know is going to happen, people aren't going to be happy with me talking down on a Breath of the Wild prequel. But guys, it's coming from someone who loves Breath of the Wild so much. I love its world, I even love its characters, and its story, and its music. Everything about the game is so good. And the one downgrade from that game was the fact that the story isn't really explained that much, which was going to be the purpose of this game, and it didn't happen at all. And so I wanted a full, complete Breath of the Wild experience, and we're never going to get that, ever. So I'm just going to have to stick to Breath of the Wild and go off of that game to see what the events actually were during the Calamity. Thanks, Age of Calamity.